My name is Andrew, and I thought I was marrying the perfect woman. I was convinced that this day would be the best day of my life, that I had found the one I would spend the rest of my life with. I was wrong. As I stood at the altar, watching Lauren walk towards me in her white dress, I felt a sense of excitement and happiness. I loved her with all my heart. She was not only beautiful, but also kind and caring. But when her gaze lingered for a second on one of the guests, I felt a chill. It was Brian, her childhood best friend. He was sitting among the guests, smiling, and I noticed a faint exchange of glances between them. Her eyes, there was something in them that I didn't understand. Then I said to myself, "You're just nervous. It's your big day. Forget about it." And I forgot. But if I had known that this look was the beginning of my nightmare, I would have run away from there right then and there. After the wedding, everything seemed to fall into place. At least that's what it seemed to me at the time. We got back from our honeymoon, and life went on as usual. I was working on developing my business, a small company that supplied electronics. Lauren also worked at a marketing agency. It seemed like we were really building our future, but something in her behavior began to change. I noticed little things. She would go out to the balcony to talk on the phone, although she had always spoken calmly in my presence. Then she would suddenly put the phone down when I entered the room. Once I asked, "Who were you talking to for so long?" "Oh, it's Jessica from work. We were discussing a new project," she smiled. But I noticed how visibly nervous she was, although she tried not to show it. Another thing that started to worry me was her constant partying with friends. Lauren used to not be a big fan of loud companies. We always spent time together, and now almost every Friday she went to the club with the girls. I trusted her, but here's what confused me. One day I accidentally met her friend Jessica at a gas station. I decided to joke, "I hope you're not going to the club again today. Are you going to hang out until the morning?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What club? We haven't met for a month." My heart sank, but I pretended that it was just a misunderstanding. I didn't want to be the man who suspects his wife's every move, but something inside me was already broken. I began to notice little things that I had previously ignored. She started to spend more time on her phone, but she always deleted messages. She started buying more expensive clothes, even though we had agreed to save for now. And most importantly, I noticed again that she often communicated with Brian. This childhood friend suddenly became a frequent guest in our house. "He just helps me with a project," Lauren explained. "I thought you had colleagues at work." "Well, yes, but he understands better." I didn't like it, but I reassured myself again. "You're just jealous. They're friends." However, even then, I felt, I'm losing her. Something was going on behind her back, and I was too blind to see it. One evening, when I got home from work, Lauren was waiting for me in the kitchen. She was standing at the table, clasping her hands together, looking excited. "I have news," she began, trying to suppress a smile, but her voice was shaking. I felt my heart jump. "What happened?" She took a deep breath and said, "I'm pregnant." I froze. Then I felt something hot rise in my chest. Joy. I hugged her, picked her up, and circled the kitchen. "Really? God, this is the best news of my life." I was happy. Really. All my doubts disappeared. I decided that I was an idiot who had screwed myself up. We were expecting a baby. Our baby. For the next few weeks, I was in seventh heaven. I told my parents, my friends. Even at work, there was a new incentive. I worked even harder because now I was responsible not only for my wife, but also for our future baby. Lauren, it seems, also became different. She was gentle, caring. We became again the same as before the wedding. All those little things that worried me, parties, calls Brian, faded into the background. I saw my wife carrying my baby in front of me. We prepared the nursery. Together we chose a stroller, a crib. She showed me tiny bodysuits and laughed. "Can you imagine? This is what our baby will wear." I looked at her and thought, I was a fool. She would never betray me. We are a family. The only thing that confused me a little, she categorically did not want me to be with her for the ultrasound. Every time I found a reason. Oh, you're busy. There's nothing interesting there. The doctor is just looking at something. Next time we'll definitely go together. I didn't insist. I trusted her. She's the mother of my child. I couldn't even imagine that even then she was hiding the terrible truth from me. When our son's birthday came, I stood in the ward and held him in my arms. It was the best moment of my life. A small, tiny boy, similar to Lauren. I looked at him and felt, this is my happiness, my family. I'll do anything for them. I didn't know that in a few years this little boy, whom I loved more than my own life, would turn out to be a stranger to me. After my son was born, my life took on new meaning. I worked even harder to provide the best for my baby, but at the same time, I tried to be the perfect father. I would come home and, before I had time to take off my jacket, I would already be holding the baby in my arms. I would rock him in the evenings when Lauren was tired. I could sit by his crib for hours and watch him sleep. Every smile he gave me was a reward. For the first time, I felt truly happy. I thought that now that we were parents, our marriage had become even stronger. But sometimes I still felt the same strange doubts that I tried to suppress, especially when I saw Lauren spending a lot of time on her phone again. She supposedly corresponded with young mothers, discussing childcare. We're just sharing experiences, she would say. I believed, because I didn't want to think that she was hiding something again. However, there was another moment that I couldn't get out of my head. It was Brian. He appeared in our lives, then closer, then disappeared. It seemed that with the birth of the child, their communication should have faded into the background. But I noticed that every time he came to visit, the same look that I had first seen at the wedding passed between them. It was quick, barely noticeable, but I felt that they had some kind of common secret. I told myself, it's just jealousy. They're friends. He helps. You're just tired of being a parent. But deep down, I already understood that I was blinded by my happiness. I had fallen so in love with the role of a father that I didn't see the obvious. Time passed. My son was almost 2 years old. I was working, growing my business, and we were about to buy a new house. It seemed like I had everything I had ever dreamed of, but the shadow of betrayal had been lurking behind me all this time. I just hadn't seen it, until one day everything turned upside down. It was a normal evening. Lauren and her son went to her mother's, and I stayed home to work. I was sitting in my office, leafing through documents, when I remembered that Lauren had asked me to find her old laptop. It was somewhere in a closet in the pantry. I took out the box, began to sort things out, and then my hand felt for something that I definitely did not expect. Lauren's old phone. I remembered it. She used it before the wedding, then she bought a new one and said that it was lost. But there it was, dusty, discharged. I connected it to the charger out of curiosity. Why are you doing this, Andrew? I thought, but inside the alarm was already burning. I turned on the phone. The password was the same as before. I went into the messages. At first, everything was normal, correspondence with friends, relatives. And then I came across a chat room signed only with the letter B. Brian. I knew it without even opening it. I clicked. At first there were ordinary jokes. Then I started to notice something more. Phrases like, it's a pity that he doesn't understand anything. It'll be our secret, you know. After the wedding, everything will be different, I promise. I felt a chill run down my spine. I continued to flip through, and there it was, a message dated 2 days after our wedding. Last night was incredible. I can't live without you, but he doesn't suspect anything. I felt like I had been slapped in the face. I reread it 10 times. I sat there, not believing my eyes. My wife, with whom I had just started a family, had slept with someone else right after the wedding, and that someone else was my friend I grabbed my phone, wanted to call her and tell her everything, but then I stopped. Something inside me said, "Don't do this. Get the evidence. Be smart." And then I made a decision. I would get a DNA test. I had to know the truth. I put the phone back in the box as if nothing had happened. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to my son breathing next to me. Or mine. My heart was already telling me the answer, but I hoped I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up a different man. Everything that had happened up until that point seemed like a lie. I looked at Lauren, who was busy at the kitchen table, making breakfast, and I no longer saw the woman I loved. There was a traitor standing in front of me, but she didn't know it yet. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, played with my little one, and inside me was only one thought. You think I don't know anything, but I'm going to find out everything. That same day, I went to the clinic where they did the paternity tests. I didn't say anything to Lauren or even to my friends. I kept quiet. The nurse took the test from me and the little one. I watched him sit in the chair, spinning a toy car in his hands. He smiled at me. I felt something inside me tighten. What if this isn't really my son? What if this whole life has been a lie? I came home devastated. When Lauren snuggled up to me in bed that night, I could barely keep from pushing her away. She whispered to me about her love, but all I could hear were lies. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but all that came to mind were fragments of the messages I'd found on my phone. Last night was incredible. He doesn't suspect anything. The test results came 3 days later. I remember opening the envelope in my car. My hands were shaking. I read the first line. Probability of paternity, 0%. I reread it again, and more. I was shaking. I knew it was true, but part of me still hoped it was some kind of mistake. But no, I wasn't raising my own child. My son was Brian's son. I slammed my fist on the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. I felt something inside me break. Everything I had built, everything I loved, was destroyed. I sat in the car for a few hours. Then I got home. Lauren met me at the door, smiling. "How was your day?" "I'm fine," I said, trying not to give away. But deep down I already knew. She would pay for everything. After the test results, I was a different person. My heart turned to stone. The love I felt for Lauren disappeared. The concern for the son I considered my own turned into bitter pain and hatred. I looked at this little creature who did not suspect anything, and I understood he was not guilty. But at the same time, I could not get rid of the thought that this was not my blood. Lauren did not notice anything. She continued to play the role of a loving wife. And I began to play my role, a deceived husband who knows nothing. But now it was my game, a game to destroy her. I began to collect information. I hacked her laptop and found archives of correspondence with Brian from before the wedding. Their affair lasted for years. I was only a cover for her, a financial cushion while she built her happiness with this freak. It turned out that Brian knew everything during the pregnancy, too. He was even at the hospital when Lauren had her ultrasound, on those days when I sat at work like a fool and thought that she just didn't want to bother me. I read how they laughed at me. Andrew is just an idiot. He won't understand anything. You're so smart, my love. You play your part perfectly. The main thing is to keep him close to the money. Then we'll go to the end together. I felt my anger growing, but I wasn't that naive guy anymore. I wasn't going to make a scandal. I was preparing a blow after, which they would never get up again. I consulted a lawyer. I told her everything, but without names for now. The main thing is that I learned that I could deprive her of any rights to my property, if I could prove the fact of betrayal and deception. Moreover, forging paternity papers could have serious consequences for Lauren. I acted quietly. I installed a tracking program on her phone. I hacked Brian on social media. I saw their correspondence in real time, and every word they said only added fuel to my rage. She thought she had me in her hands. but I was already tightening the noose around her neck. When I played with the little one in the park, Lauren hugged me and laughed, and I stroked her back. I already knew that this was the beginning of her end. I was just waiting for the right moment to destroy everything she had so diligently built behind my back with one move. I was no longer her husband. I had become her sentence. I understood that in order to deliver the decisive blow, I needed Lauren to take a step into the abyss herself. I didn't want to simply accuse her of betrayal. I wanted her to sign her own verdict, so that she would be sure that everything was going according to her plan, and then I would tear the ground out from under her feet. I began to act cautiously, like an experienced chess player. At first, I gradually hinted to her that I was tired of working without rest, that perhaps I should transfer a part of the business to someone else, so that we could spend more time together with my son. "We are a family now," I said. "I want to be with you." I saw the sparkle in her eyes. She thought that I was about to hand everything over to her, that I would voluntarily sign the documents transferring part of the company to her. She already imagined how in a year or two, when I was no longer needed, she would file for divorce and take everything. I would plant these thoughts in her. I played the role of a naive husband who just wanted happiness, and she was carried away. I saw how she began to talk about money more often, how she hinted that we needed more in common in the business, even consulting with friends about how best to do business together. But I knew that these friends were Brian, and together they were already drawing up a plan to get me out of the way. The key moment came a few weeks later. Lauren herself suggested, "Maybe we should register part of the business in my name? It would be safer. What if something happened to you?" I could barely hold back a smile. I was waiting for that. "Okay," I answered. "There is just a good lawyer. Let's prepare the documents." Her eyes lit up. She thought she already had me in her hands. She didn't know that I had already prepared another set of documents, one that wouldn't give her a penny, one that would be a trap for her. While I was signing the papers, I saw her texting someone. I already knew who. "Everything is going according to plan. He's signing. Soon everything will be ours." I looked at her and smiled. She was sure she was winning. But in reality, this was the day she lost everything. She just didn't know it yet. The trap had snapped. The documents were signed. Lauren thought she had taken control of the business. She was celebrating, but she had no idea I was playing a few moves ahead. I had drafted another set of documents in advance, which gave her zero rights to the company. They looked identical to the ones she had reviewed. But the key points had been changed. No stake in the business for Lauren. Asset protection from joint distribution in the event of a divorce. Fixing my sole ownership of all accounts. She thought that if I left, everything would go to her. But in reality, nothing belonged to her. Then I moved on to the next stage. I quietly transferred all of our joint savings into safe deposit accounts, opened new companies, and transferred key assets there. I even arranged with the bank to temporarily freeze our joint accounts so that she couldn't withdraw money at the last minute. And so, when all the traps were set, I decided to give her one last chance to see if she would go through with the betrayal. I pretended to be going on a business trip for 3 days. In fact, I wasn't going anywhere. I rented an apartment on the other side of town and installed surveillance cameras in our house. I had evidence of financial fraud, but I wanted to get the main evidence of her betrayal, and I didn't have to wait long. The very first evening, Brian came into my house as if it were his property. He hugged my wife, they laughed, drank wine, and openly talked about how they had outsmarted me. "He'll transfer the rest of the money tomorrow, and we can act. Just don't give up too soon. He still trusts you." I watched them kiss as he carried her upstairs to our bedroom, and I finally felt true peace. Now I had everything I needed. The next morning, Lauren would wake up in a world where she would have nothing left. I would destroy her just as she tried to destroy me. I got home early in the morning while they were still asleep. I opened the door with my key. There were 2 empty wine glasses in the kitchen. I heard a light snoring from the bedroom, our beds, where they slept together. I wanted to rip the door off its hinges, but I took a deep breath. This wasn't about emotions anymore. This was business. This was war. And I had already won. I sat down at the table in the living room and turned on the TV. Loud. On full blast. To wake them up. "What's going on?" Lauren exclaimed in irritation, coming out of the room in her bathrobe. Behind her, buttoning up her shirt, was that brat, Brian. They both stopped when they saw me. Lauren turned pale. Brian froze like a deer in headlights. "Would you like breakfast?" I asked calmly, taking a sip of coffee. Lauren started to babble, making up stories about Brian simply staying the night after the party. I silently opened my laptop. I pressed play. They appeared on the screen. Their kisses. Their conversations about me. Their plans to wrap me around their finger. Lauren clutched her mouth. Brian was covered in sweat. They understood this was the end. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. "Already done," I replied. I threw her a folder with documents. Everything was there. Waiver of rights to the business. Waiver of claims to the house. Acknowledgement that I am not the father. I made photocopies for the court and the lawyer. "You sign, you'll get a few thousand so you don't starve to death. If you don't sign, you'll go to court. I'll lay out everything, including your schemes and your fake paternity. I'll add a video for your relatives, friends, your work." Brian opened his mouth, wanting to say something. "You'd better keep quiet until I decide to hang you for fraud." I cut him off. They were both silent. I saw fear in their eyes. Destruction. An hour later, everything was signed. I called the lawyer. The papers were in the file. A day later, Lauren's accounts were blocked. She left my house with one suitcase. Brian? He disappeared as soon as he realized that he had also been thrown overboard. He was nowhere to be found, like a rat. He ran away as soon as he smelled burning. I stood in an empty house. Now it was mine alone. I picked up the same engagement ring that Lauren had given me on our wedding day and threw it in the trash. I had won. I had taken everything. And now I was starting my life over with a clean slate. No lies. No betrayal. Just me. And my freedom. A week had passed since I had kicked Lauren out. The house had become quiet. Too quiet. I was alone with myself for the first time in a long time. On the one hand, I felt relieved. I had cut the people who had betrayed me out of my life. I had won this battle. But on the other hand, I felt empty. Part of me still missed that perfect family I had built in my fantasies. I missed the little one. Even though he wasn't my blood, I had raised him, held him in my arms since day one. And that feeling is not easy to erase. I got home late at night. I had planned to take a shower and go to bed, but as I approached the door, I saw a familiar figure. Lauren. She was sitting on the steps, her face buried in her hands. You could tell she had been crying, disheveled, without makeup, different, not the glamorous woman I knew. "What do you need?" I asked coldly. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling. "Andrew, I'm sorry. I messed up." I was silent. I'm left with nothing. Brian dumped me. I can't find a job anywhere. Everyone knows. I'm being judged. I've lost everything, Andrew, and I miss you. Our son. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I just made a mistake. Please, give me a chance. Her shoulders shook. This wasn't the confident, cunning Lauren who had been scheming behind my back. This was a broken woman who had lost everything. But I was no longer the man she knew. I'm stronger. I won't let anyone walk over me again. Lauren, you made a choice. I gave you everything. Love, home, trust, and you trampled it all in the mud. You betrayed me. You stole years of my life from me. You forced me to raise someone else's child, passing it off as mine. I paused. I looked into her eyes. There was still hope there. And I never want to see you again. Those words tore her apart. I saw it. She said something else, but I wasn't listening anymore. I closed the door. I stood in the dark room, listening to her footsteps recede. And you know what I felt? Relief. I had truly closed that chapter of my life, once and for all. After that last conversation with Lauren, I closed the door behind her. Not just the real one, but the door to my past life. But it turned out to be much easier to do than to let go of everything that had happened. I naively thought that after the final period, I would immediately feel free. But instead, I felt devastated. The first few days I felt relieved, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I am free. I no longer look at my wife and think, she's lying to me. She's cheating on me. But then, there was silence. I would return to the house, big, spacious, but empty. No one ran to meet me. No children's laughter. There were no little arms that hugged my neck. When I walk in the door, and that was the most painful thing, I raised that boy as my own. I was with him when he took his first steps, when he said his first word. Yes, he wasn't my son, but for my heart he was still my child. And now I was left without him. I knew it was the right decision, but this emptiness, it was eating me up from the inside. I started working a lot. I would come home late, fall asleep almost at dawn. Business went up. I put all my emotions into it, and, it helped. I became more successful than ever. I started playing sports, changed my style of clothing, even bought a new car. People around me said, "Andrew, you've blossomed. Look at yourself. You're like a millionaire bachelor now." I smiled. On the outside, yes, I look happy, but on the inside, I understood. This betrayal left a scar on me, a scar that would never go away. I no longer trusted women. Everyone who appeared in my life raised only one question: and when will you cheat on me? I tried to build new relationships, but as soon as a girl responded to a message late or went out with her friends, everything inside me boiled. I remembered Lauren, Brian, their smiles, and I simply ended the relationship. I became closed, tough, strong, but happy. I don't know. One evening I was sitting in a bar, drinking whiskey. Suddenly a couple came in the door, a man and a woman. I almost choked. It was Lauren. She was walking arm in arm, not with Brian, but with some other guy. I looked at her carefully. She was no longer the same as before. I saw a tired woman who was smiling strangely, trying to seem happy. But I saw it was a mask. She had lost everything, and now she was looking for a new breadwinner. She looked at me. Our eyes met. I saw shame and pain in her gaze. She abruptly looked away and pretended not to recognize me. I smiled, not out of anger, but with understanding. I won. I remained myself, and she lost myself forever. I finished my whiskey, paid, and left the bar. And this time, I finally felt free. A few more months passed. I was more and more immersed in work. Money was flowing in like a river. I could afford everything. Vacations in the Maldives, expensive cars, the best restaurants. But every night, I would come back to an empty house, and I felt that I was missing something real. One day, after a hard day at work, I decided to go to a cafe, where Lauren and I used to often have lunch. I hadn't been there for a long time, but something drew me there. I sat down at a table in the corner, ordered a coffee, and scrolled through my phone. And suddenly I heard a familiar voice. "Andrew? Is that you?" I raised my head. In front of me stood Anna, my classmate from university. We were good friends then, but after graduation, we went to different cities. I hadn't seen her for over 10 years. She had hardly changed. Perhaps she had become even more beautiful. There was something so real in her eyes. I invited her to sit down. We talked for 3 hours. I told her everything about Lauren, about the test, about the betrayal, about my revenge. For the first time in a long time, I opened up to someone completely. Anna listened attentively, without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I don't know how you got through this. You're strong, but I'm sorry you had to go through this." There was no regret in her voice, only sincerity. We started seeing each other more often. At first, just as friends, lunch, walks. But over time, I realized that I was good with her. I started laughing again. I felt that life was not just about money and business. For the first time in a long time, I wanted something more, something real. And for the first time I thought, maybe I can still be happy. A few more weeks passed. I spent more and more time with Anna, and I really felt better. It seemed that the past was gradually letting go. I was already starting to look at the future without pain. But the past reminded me of itself again. It happened unexpectedly. I was leaving the office late at night when I saw her standing by my car. Lauren, she looked even worse than last time. She had lost weight. Her face was exhausted. Her eyes were red. I stopped. There was no more anger. There was only cold. "Andrew, can I talk to you?" I sighed. "What else?" I lost everything. Brian is gone for good. No job. I can't see my son. They won't let me see him. His new family doesn't want me around. I know you raised him. I know how you loved him. I want to know how I'm so hurt. I ruined everything. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I was silent. I looked at her. In front of me was no longer my ex-wife, not a traitor, but just a broken person who had lost everything. I could have said a lot, humiliate her, trample her again, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. I want you to find peace, Lauren, but there's no place for you in my life anymore. Goodbye. I got in the car and drove away, and for the first time in all this time, I felt that I had truly put an end to it. That evening I called Anna. "Is dinner still relevant tonight?" "Always," she laughed. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I had a life ahead of me, a real one. And this time, no lies. The final. Please subscribe to our channel Stellar Stories. We have new amazing stories coming out every day. Thank you.